Happy Friday and welcome back to the Pastafarian Temple. As promised, each week we've been taking a look at a different big question. This week's question isn't as big as some of the other questions we'll be examining, but it's one very important to Pastafarians. When I tell someone I'm a Pastafarian and explain what that means, the first question they always seem to ask is, do you really believe in a flying spaghetti monster? It's a valid question and worth taking a look at. So, do Pastafarians actually believe in a flying spaghetti monster? No, of course not, that'd be silly. But just because the flying spaghetti monster isn't real doesn't mean we can't worship it. Now, that may sound strange, but bear with me for a moment and I'll try my best to explain. When Pastafarians worship the flying spaghetti monster, we don't do it for the flying spaghetti monster's benefit. After all, the flying spaghetti monster doesn't exist. When we worship it, it's for our benefit. Still confused? Perhaps calling in some help, some other help will help. The following is a reading from Terry Pratchett's Hogfather. The main character, Susan, is asking Death himself about the Hogfather, the setting's analogy for Santa Claus. "All right," said Susan. "I'm not stupid. You're saying humans need fantasies to make life bearable." "Really? As if it was some kind of pink pill. No, humans need fantasy to be human, to be the place where the falling angel meets the rising ape." "Tooth fairies? Hogfathers? Little?" "Yes, as practice. You have to start out learning to believe the little lies." "So we can believe the big ones?" "Yes, justice, mercy, duty, that sort of thing." "They're not the same at all." "You think so? Then take the universe and grind it down to the finest powder, and sieve it through the finest sieve. And then show me one atom of justice, one molecule of mercy. And yet," Death waved his hand, "and yet you act as if there is some ideal order in the world, as if there is some rightness in the universe by which it might be judged." "Yes, but people have got to believe that, or what's the point?" "My point exactly." Are you starting to see what I'm getting at? Pastafarians worship the flying spaghetti monster not out of some obligation, but because it's a useful tool to help us approach other concepts, other bigger concepts. By telling stories and parables centered around the flying spaghetti monster, we can explain valuable life lessons in an entertaining and memorable way. There are also other benefits Pastafarians glean from worship. Praying to the flying spaghetti monster, for example. Now, while these prayers may be to the flying spaghetti monster, they are not for the flying spaghetti monster. They are for the Pastafarian doing the praying. When I pray, when I put my innermost thoughts into words, I do this because I need to get those thoughts out. Just because something needs to be said does not necessarily mean it needs to be heard. My prayers are for my own sake, not for the flying spaghetti monster or anyone else's. We are all familiar with the saying, there are no atheists in foxholes. In our weakest moments, it often helps to lay our troubles out, to acknowledge them. Prayers to the flying spaghetti monster let us do that. There is real power in prayer, not because those prayers are answered or even heard, but because those prayers are said, because those prayers are prayed. There are also benefits to other practices that Pastafarians do in the flying spaghetti monster's name. Simple things like wearing a colander, dressing up like a pirate, drinking beer and rum, and enjoying life, or even just eating spaghetti, are all ways for us to set down our spiritual loads, ways for us to take a rest from the world around us, even if it's only for a moment. As long as it's done in the flying spaghetti monster's name, it serves as a form of meditation. We use these small actions to bring us closer to our God. It's a way to lift ourselves up, even if the target happens to be imaginary. We may never reach perfection, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't strive for it. Now, I've explained why we worship, but why do we worship a flying spaghetti monster, specifically? To which the answer should be obvious. Why not? A god by any other name would sound as silly. When Bobby Henderson wrote his letter to the Kansas School Board, he used the image of a flying spaghetti monster. He could have used a celestial orbiting teapot. He could have used a giant talking space hamster. But he didn't. He happened to use a flying spaghetti monster, so that is what we worship. Don't get me wrong, the image of a flying spaghetti monster is meant to be ridiculous. We accept and embrace this. It's meant to make us pause and go, seriously. It's meant to make us ask questions. Is this really any crazier than what other religions teach? What do we believe is out there? Why do we believe that? Is there any proof? And as far as gods go, the image of a flying spaghetti monster serves pretty well, a both as a comforting presence and as an explanation for the world around us. What better to represent a life giver than with literal food, without which there is no life? How better to explain all the craziness in the world with a simple whoever designed this must have been drunk at the time? As I mentioned earlier, Pastafarians tell fictional creation stories and other parables, each more absurd than the last, as a way to lead each other down paths to truth. For example, we may tell of how pirates prevent global warming, not because we believe it's true, but because it forces the listener to ask questions. Is that any more crazy than preaching that another god is angry at any other type of people and punishing us all with natural disasters? If God is not if a God is not causing these problems, who or what is? What are we going to do about it? Where's the proof? We use ideas of heaven to ask questions about why we do right and wrong, if not out of fear of punishment or promise of reward. Now, that last question is one of my favorite topics. It's called ethics, and will be the subject of next week's sermon. I hope you join me. Until then, thank you for watching, and may you be touched by his noodly appendage. Ramen.